Today, we are going to make some grass. No, I'm not in Colorado, so it's not going to be that kind of grass. It's our techniques that are so simple and sensible, your mowers will practically build themselves. Hello folks, it's Mad Dog Merv and welcome to today's show. Today we are going to be looking at a certain tank that I just absolutely love playing with in World of Tanks. But it's a real tank. It actually was a, how could I put it? It was an experimental turret that was made just for a specific gun. And because they didn't really have a chassis ready for it, they put it on. They took the turret off of an M6, which, if you've seen some of my other videos about the M6, it was a tank that, it was the first U.S. heavy tank developed, but it never actually saw combat. There were like 40 of them made. Anyway, they took one of the hulls and they put this big old turret on it. And the official designation was M6A2E1. But those in the World of Tanks world know that it's just called the Mutant 6. And it looks like a mutant. So we're going to look at how I built the turret for this thing today. Stick around and let's take a look at the Mutant 6.
So here's the subject of today's video. The M6A2E1. And this is pilot number 1, the actual photo of it. Design work on this started in July of 1944. You can see by this drawing here, here's the final mock-up drawing. The armament was to be the T5 105mm main gun. This is the main gun that was going to be on the T29 series of tanks. This weighed in at 77 tons, and between the turret and the hull had an ammo capacity of 72 rounds. There were 2 units built, Pilot 1 and Pilot 2. So to start construction, I need some AUT-40 sheet styrene. This is for the main frame of it, and some AUT-20. This is what we're going to use for the sides of the turret. Now again, we're just building the turret. And of course we need some Tamiya ultra thin cement. This is what I use for the texturing as well as assembly. And some milliput, which I'm going to be using for several different things, but particularly like the turret ring. We're also going to be making the weld seams out of this material. And then some Tamiya putty. We're going to use this to fill in some of the little gaps where we need to here and there, because my construction technique is certainly not perfect. So let's look at the tank that's in my World of Tanks game. Here I've got some camouflage on it. Sorry, this is a screenshot, so it's not a very good picture, but you kind of get the idea of the shape of this turret. It's like an upside down Frankenstein. By the time of this tank's development, the T29 turret was not finalized. They continued making some developments to that turret. So this was going to be this test bed for the T5 gun. As you can see, this has got typical late war hatches on it and other accoutrements. So I've taken the drawing and I blew it up. Blew it up to what looked like 1/35 scale. So I would kind of have the dimensions and whatnot. Went ahead and cut out the shape for the turret so I could get the turret started. So once this was laid out and cut out, I need to start building some, well, structure to it. And as you can see, that AUT-40 has come in very handy. In some areas I've layered it so that it would make it even stronger and thicker. For the front, went ahead and cut this one part off the front, put it on an angle, and as you can see, I've used some styrene that I've angled there to make the shape the way that I need it. So once I got these parts in, to try and get the back, I actually took the turret from the back of the turret from the T29 and glued it back here along with some supports so that I could kind of get the shape of the back end right. You can see all the layers here that we've had to do here in the back. This was just to try and get a basic idea for the shape of the T29 and what I was going to have to change on this turret. So here I've taken the front plate from the T29 and put this in here so I could mount the mantlet, and it fits in very, very nicely. Now here you see a combination of the 20-aught and the 40-aught to get these sides molded the way I wanted them to be molded, if you will. So I've used some of my ultra-thin cement to try and get this to conform properly, and some elastics to also get them to conform. Here's a big old finger mark I've left on it. And you can see the top doesn't fit perfect. I'm just going to take a file and file that down. So here we go. We've cut our pieces, we've fit them in, we've done some trimming, and it looks really, really rough. So at this point I'm really starting to wonder how this is going to turn out, but never fear, we'll get it filled in. This is how it's supposed to look. So yeah, I've got a ways to go, and you notice that big gnarly weld seam that's on there, and we're going to try to replicate that as well. So here I'm trying to cut some of the smaller pieces and get them fit around there. It's a good thing I had these rubber bands. Here you can see the top doesn't quite, I don't have the sides quite matched to the top yet, but I will be working on this, a little bit of sanding and filling, and we should be fine. So here it looks like we've got all our pieces in on the side. Now I just have to use some putty and get this filled in. You can see this looks really rough, but here in a minute you're going to see it turns out okay. So here is a great still from a video clip of the M6 tank that is on a bond tour. And we're going to be using the lower hull. We're going to need that for this Mutant 6 build. Now, about 4 years ago, I did a M6 build here on the channel. Go check it out. It's one of my very first videos. And this one I put a 90mm on it and made it up like it was actually in going to combat. Although these never saw combat. There were 40 of them actually built, however. Now here's a drawing of a T29 turret on the right with that same T5 gun, and the experimental turret that they made for the M6A2E1. Okay, so now we're going to be doing some filling with some Tamiya filler, or Tamiya putty, and we're going to start getting that on and sanded and start getting our shape. Now you can also see here I used some strip of half round. I was going to do the weld out of that, but it didn't work out. You see how I got the angle here on the bottom? This is actually starting to look really, really good. The shape itself is. So you can see here I've got this strip, and I took a hot soldering pencil and did this to it to get the weld seam. However, it didn't work out right. It was too big, so I scraped it all off, and I went back and I took some of the milliput, rolled it out really thin, put it on here, flattened it out a little bit, and then took my X-Acto knife to make these look like the weld beads. If you want to see more on how I do that, check out the M4 video that I released just recently on the Tamiya M4 and how I built that. And you can see here it is. It's raw, but I'm going to go over this with a file, and we should be able to knock down some of the high spots, and it should look more like a weld seam. Here we are rounding off the top a little bit. And what I've done is I've taken some Tamiya ultra thin cement, and that's how I do my texturing. Again, if you want to see more of that, go ahead and check out that M4 Tamiya video that I recently put out. And here's our weld seam. It's starting to look pretty good, and the weld seam in the back. Now I'm just going to have to start putting some of those accoutrements on there. And you can see the weld seam, not the weld seam, the texture is turning out pretty good as well. So now for the mantlet, it's a very unique mantlet. It looks more like something off of a T26, a Pershing. So I'm going to use the front piece from this T29, and as you can see, I'm having to cut some of these areas back, build it up a little bit with some sheet styrene to get the proper shape for the mantlet area. One thing I did forget was the bottom of the turret, where it's kind of tapers in. So I took some of the milliput, mixed it up, rolled it out into a big long snake, and just put it on the bottom here, and it turns out really, really good. Flattened it out just a little bit on the bottom, so I've got that really nice taper to the bottom of the turret, and I think it turned out just fine. But now I'm going to have to put a weld seam there as well, because that's what you see in the pictures of the real tank. And you can kind of see how the bottom's looking here. Okay, so now I think we're ready to start putting hatches and those other things on. So I've got to get all of that stuff together that I need. Once I've got it all together, now I've got to lay it out. And I'm going to make marks here on the turret as to where I want to put these different items. So you can see where I've marked everything. I'm going to start cutting that with my X-Acto knife and a pin vise. And I was able to get this taken out pretty easily. But again, I can't make any mistakes because on the loader's hatch, it's got to be flush. So anyway, we'll start getting everything laid out on there and get some olive drab on it, and poof, here we go. Now I'm going to compare it here with the T29 turret that I've already built. You can kind of see the size and how its shape is quite a bit different. So let's go ahead and take a look now that I've got some paint on it. I've got the mantlet on there from a T26 or a Pershing. Here you can see the weld seams, how those turned out. Again, they're pretty big weld seams. The holder for the machine gun stowage. Antenna. The loader's hatch latch. The spotlight. The commander's gun sight there. The air vent, the pintle for the machine gun, all that kind of fun stuff, and the hooks, the lifting rings for the turret itself, and then the lifting rings here for the gun and for the mantlet as well. The barrel itself is a turned aluminum barrel that came in my T28 kit, so I figured I would use that. The muzzle brake is also from that same kit.
Okay, so this is an M6 that I have been working on. I obviously haven't done anything with the lower hull, just the upper hull, and I built the turret. But you get the idea. You've seen my other M6, and I'm sure you know what an M6 looks like. But here is the standard turret. Okay, I'm going to put that aside. And here it is with the the A2E1 turret on it. Now you can see why this thing is called the Mutant 6. Holy cow. Yeah, compared with the little 75 millimeter or a 3-inch gun that's on here, yeah, that's something else. Remember, there was actually one of these built, so kind of cool.